liberation begin.
Welcome, Gothamites, to another episode of the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward. With me, as always, the psychologist to the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City, and now somewhere in upstate New York, possibly for the last time, or will it be to be continued? She's Dr. Drea Letamendi. Hello, Drea.
Hi, Brian. Do you like my jacket?
I love your jacket. This is the first time I have seen this jacket. This jacket is pretty epic.
I mean, it's, first of all,
by the way, for those of
it's
you
way too big.
not on our Patreon watching these videos, you don't get to see the epic jacket, but it is an epic jacket. Drea, pretend you're on the radio for a moment. Tell people what this jacket looks like if they can't see it.
Sure. This jacket is 90s style, oversized, comic, very vibrant, comic heavy, kind of vintage looking X-Men classic Storm jacket. There's the word Storm across the front, and then the back actually has
There's a big image of Storm. For those, well, can you show the folks, or
I think so. I mean, this is.
I'm not going to pressure you. I'm not going to pressure you.
I got you.
Okay. All
well,
right.
the other thing is it's the kind of material. It's very polyestery, so it's making all of this.
Yeah, it's got a lot of noise involved. Yeah. Look at that. What a great image of Storm. Just full right there on the back of your coat. You got the big X-Men symbols on the shoulders. It's pretty crazy.
It is. It's gigantic because they
Are
only
people
had.
going to see this at an upcoming convention?
I
do you
think so. They only had one size, and it's about 3 sizes too big for me. So I'm just swimming in this jacket, but I just could not resist. Yeah, I'll probably bring it to an upcoming panel or appearance
that we'll be having in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
We will. Do you want to talk about that now? Or
Why not? I think we're allowed. Finally,
we're officially allowed. It has been announced, which means we are allowed to tell folks that the aforementioned Comic-Con panel for 2024 will be held on Saturday, 7 p.m. in the Marriott Grand Marquis Ballrooms 12 and 13. So this is going to be a sizable room, very similar to the one we had last year, if not the exact same one we had last year when we talked about the psychology of Star Trek Picard. And we are going to continue our conversation and analysis of X-Men the Animated Series by specifically talking about X-Men 97. That's the new incarnation of the series that you can find on Disney Plus right now. The entire first season is available and is absolutely amazing. We will be joined by a couple of different people. Like our last panel at WonderCon, we will have writer JB Ballard. We will have the supervising producer and director, Jake Castorena. We will have the voice of Rogue, Lenore Zan, and the voice of your jacket's namesake, Storm, Allison Seeley Smith. Those 4 folks will all be joining us to discuss the psychology of X-Men 97. How excited are you about this panel, Drea?
I'm super excited. We have 2 X-Men voice cast members coming, Storm and Rogue.
2 of our favorites. I've told you before,
Absolutely.
Rogue is right there.
Well,
she might be my favorite X-Men of all time.
And they run the show as far as X-Men 97 for sure.
Yeah.
And then 2 folks who I think can really speak to the development and creation of this version of X-Men animated series. I want to give a shout out to Eric and Julia Leewald, who not only developed and directed so many of the original episodes, but, X-Men 97 could not have happened without their vision.
Nope, 100%. And we should go ahead and give a shout out. X-Men 97 literally just 2 days ago was announced as a 2-time Primetime Emmy Award nominee for this year. So congratulations to the team behind X-Men 97. It is well-deserved. And like you said, Drea, this show would not have these Emmy nominations if it weren't for all of the work that folks like Eric Lewald and his team put into this original incarnation of X-Men, the animated series that we're covering. So we're very happy for them. It's happening at a perfect time for us, and we can't wait. There's one other major announcement, because this is our final episode covering X-Men the Animated Series Season 1. We now need to know what we're covering next. We've been hinting at this for a couple of episodes now, but I can say that definitively, as I say this now, polling has closed over on our Discord for what we're covering next. Drea, why don't you tell the folks, especially those who have not heard the last episode, what the possibilities were going into this decision?
Sure. Well, we had a number of choices, and we gave our Discord family a chance to weigh in. And out of these 7 choices, we're going to pick 3 based on the most popular votes.
Right. And a 4th is an automatic
Yeah, the
finalist.
4th will be X-Men Animated Series Season 2.
Yes.
So the choices were Battlestar Galactica Season 1, The Cape Crusader Season 1, which is coming out next month, Gargoyles Season 1, Harley Quinn Animated Series Season 1, The Last of Us Season 1, The Penguin Season 1, also coming out in about a month or so. And we threw in Suicide Squad, the anime, Season 1. So it was a surprising landslide. Gargoyles had the most votes on our Discord, so
Wow.
that will go into the running.
I am not surprised. I mean, I'm a little surprised because we started out as a Batman podcast, so I would have thought that maybe there would have been a bigger showing for like Cape Crusader or Penguin or Harley Quinn. But I am not surprised because Gargoyles has been requested so often by so many different people that I'm not surprised that it had a strong showing. What came in second?
Well, the Harley Quinn animated series actually came in first, just at the toward the end of the polling.
Now let's be honest. Is that because you threw in a vote for
No,
Harley
I
Quinn?
did. I actually did not vote.
I
I did not vote. I did not vote in this one.
Because up to this recording now, this is the first time I'm learning Gargoyles wasn't the number 1 selection by a landslide.
Right. And sorry, I was misleading around that. Gargoyles was the front runner from the jump.
Day 1, yeah.
And then Harley Quinn just caught up and
Swooped
surpassed
in.
by 1 vote.
Wow.
And then Cape Crusader is just making it through to the final 3rd spot.
Okay.
Unfortunately, none of the others will be, have enough votes to get into the final voting poll.
Okay.
But we have then, therefore, finally, Gargoyles.
Season 1, which can be seen on Disney Plus.
We have the Cape Crusader, which will be on Prime.
Yep, and that's coming out in just a couple of weeks.
And then we have Harley Quinn, which has been out. It's been on HBO Max for some time, well into its maybe 4th season. And that the 3 of those shows will go into our Patreon poll.
And then the 4th show, which is an automatic victor, which I think you kind of keep forgetting to mention because it wasn't part of the poll.
Sure.
But X-Men Season 2, because this season was so successful and so riveting, and because we liked it so much, we went ahead and said, this is an automatic finalist. So we now have the opportunity to either continue with the show that we are covering now or cover a show that deals with 1930s Batman, which could be really cool, or a show that's more on the comical level with Harley Quinn, but is really significantly and surprisingly deep for such a funny show. And then Gargoyles season 1, which we have no real basis of comparison. I think you and I watched one episode once because it was recommended to us.
It is a dark show.
Yeah, and now we're looking forward to possibly taking that on. You know what would be cool about that? Because as of the airing of this podcast, everyone, you can go to patreon.com/Arkham Sessions. And for the $3 tier, you can cast your vote. And only our patrons are allowed to decide what we officially cover next. After this current episode, we will have our panel from Comic-Con that will go up. And then right after that, we will move right into our next show, most likely. So, but what's cool is you and I will be in Las Vegas for STLV, and 2 voice cast members from Gargoyles will be right there in the room with us, Jonathan Frakes and Marina Sirtis.
Right.
This is the biggest Star Trek convention in the country, if not the world. Just about everyone who is involved with some incarnation of Star Trek, if they're still alive and they do conventions, they're probably going to be there. And we could just walk right up to them and announce to them at that point, we're covering your show next.
Well, calm down.
I know. I'm just excited about the possibility. But
So we're going to throw the poll onto Patreon. That should be up around the same time that this episode drops.
yes, by the time you're hearing this announcement right now, you can go to patreon.com/Arkham Sessions, pay $3 a month, or even just for that 1 month, so that you can vote and have your voice heard. But that poll is now live.
I want to also thank our Discord family for being a part of our community and welcome some new members. SK, thanks for being with us. We can also welcome Majin Keem. Welcome to you. J Punk, thanks for joining. GM Farley, Marion. So a bunch of folks have joined us, I think, certainly since we started that poll. And again, as a reminder, our Discord for the Arkham Sessions is absolutely free of cost. There's lots of fun things we do in there. We always start our poll there. And you'll see some exclusive stuff in there that you won't see in other places. Patreon is a different community that we have where the final vote will go up. Mm-hmm. And as things are landing, they are going according to plan.
Oh, according to you? Really? All right.
I have no hand in this, Brian. It's just the universe.
But you definitely know what you want to cover. Although it sounds like what you originally wanted to cover may not be in those top
That's not true at all.
2 at least, right?
I'm not showing my cards. I'm just saying I have a neutral approach. It's a fair...
But also a vote in the wings just waiting. If you heard our last episode, Drea revealed for the first time ever that occasionally she will throw some of her weight behind a particular show by voting just the one time. It's not like you've got 20 dummy accounts.
No. I just vote once.
You just vote once. And this was the first time people were learning about this. But very cool. Drea, you want to talk about the final episode of season 1 of X-Men, the animated series?
It's called The Final Decision, which is such a haunting title for an X-Men episode. They often are, but this one made me concerned. Leading up to this episode, we had things had culminated up to us as the audience understanding that this critical event will lead into essentially this apocalyptic, very dismal future for mutants in particular, where actually both humans and mutants meet this very dire existence, but it's mutants who, according to this this time traveler Bishop, will be essentially persecuted, incarcerated, and exterminated. So it's a really, really frightening future. So of course, the X-Men gather and bond together to try to keep that from happening. And it leads to interfacing with government officials. Like all of this has to do with the potential legislation and the folks behind that legislation who's going to push an agenda that's considerably anti-mutant.
Right.
So the final decision has this, kind of very, predictable, or at least this foreboding prediction about the future. And
which changed. We should
Yes.
remind folks that in the 2-episode Days of Future Past, Bishop said that an assassination attempt was going to lead to this traumatic future, and they stopped the assassination attempt successfully. However, a new character popped in and may have actually made the future worse. We'll talk a little bit about that as we go.
Sure.
So I do appreciate that this entire season has led up to this moment. Like, none of the episodes have been so standalone that they didn't in some way affect what we eventually saw in the finale, I would say. I mean, maybe if you were going to pick one, I would say the Morlocks.
Yeah.
But the Morlock episode was so important because it established that there are mutants out in the world who may not want to be mutants and it may be more difficult for them to pass in the world. Mm-hmm. And so I think that episode still in some way led to where we are. But every episode has eventually led to the creation of Sentinels and the potential regulation or I'm just going to say it. It's a little bit of a spoiler, like a true sentience of the Sentinels.
Got it.
Of
Okay.
Master Mold and the Sentinels.
Right.
Humans
it's
are no longer really the problem anymore.
Right. It's clear that this is a turning point.
Yes.
Something has to happen. Either mutants need to back down and, face their fate, or
The militarized mutants. you mean.
sure,
Yeah.
sure, or some cataclysmic thing has to happen for non-mutants to change their perspective and support legislation that would be much more about equality for mutants and non-mutants, but also handle the increasing force of the Sentinels, which is the army of, for lack of a better word, like robots.
Giant robots that are all led by a centralized computer, not in the same way as, say, the Borg. They're not a collective hive mind, but there is clearly someone operating them as a team, one could say. A team of gigantic robots who are all tasked with capturing and exterminating mutants. Let's go right into this episode from the beginning. So they were able to successfully stop the assassination attempt of Senator Kelly, who was announcing his presidency of the United States. And we learned that it wasn't actually Gambit. Instead, it was Mystique taking the form of Gambit, who was already this roguish, no pun intended, character who may or may not truly be trustworthy as part of the X-Men team. And turns out Gambit's as trustworthy as anyone. He's not the person who was going to assassinate Senator Kelly. And potentially Apocalypse's plan is now done for, except that someone else came in and thought this was a good idea, but it wasn't executed well enough. And that is, of course, number one arch nemesis of the X-Men, Magneto. He came to witness the assassination, saw that it didn't go as planned, kidnapped Senator Kelly, took him to another location where he then decided he was going to go ahead and kill Kelly so that this civil war could begin, and they could establish mutants as a force with which to be reckoned. And that didn't work out. A sentinel then comes in, breaks through the wall, takes Kelly, and really beats up on Magneto, who is then taken back to the X-Mansion to recover. And Kelly is taken to the new Master Mold location, the big facility, the factory for Sentinels, and is basically told by Trask that I will need your help getting government approval to basically make these a new police force, tracking down, rounding up, and quietly exterminating mutants. Senator Kelly says, I've got no problem with that whatsoever. Let's make that happen. And Master Mold is like, yeah, that's not my plan.
Right.
So we have now reached a point in this episode from 1993 that is just as relevant today as it was then, because you're now dealing with AI and you're dealing with sentient AI. You're dealing with a computer that is now using logic only to determine the outcome of the Earth.
Well, in support of this AI, can you play that clip where
I have
the
that
tables
clip.
turn, right? So play that and then we'll do a deeper dive.
Yeah, so here is the scene in question. Here we go.
You can't make me do this. You were designed to protect humans from mutants.
That is not logical. Mutants are human. Therefore, humans must be protected from themselves.
So Master Mold isn't wrong here.
I know, that's the scary part. And that's the best part of the X-Men is you can easily take sides, or not easily. It's easy to say both sides between Xavier and Magneto are valid.
Sure.
And that you could justify being on either side you want. But now you've got a third side that comes in and says, you're all idiots. You're all the same.
Well, it's a being of higher intelligence that points out the
conundrum.
Well, it's almost like saying the reasons that divide these communities are irrelevant.
Yes.
And minimal. It really kind of takes this perspective where the differences between mutants and non-mutants are minuscule to this higher level being. It's a very neutral approach, and it's true.
Master Mold
You're all
can't see
human.
the difference between the two different races, I use in quotes, of people.
You're all human beings.
Yeah.
You all share the same general DNA, so therefore
And by
you're
the
all
way,
the same.
Exactly. And you all share the same destructive qualities that are ultimately going to end all of you anyway. Therefore, the only way to protect you from yourselves is to simply eliminate all of you.
I mean,
Which, by the way, is not a new trope. Like,
Well, I
this
was
is
going to say, this reminds me of Thanos.
This is Thanos. This is
Apocalypse.
Skynet from Terminator. This is, yes, Thanos to some degree, but when I say that, I'm talking about computers who have decided that human beings are their own worst enemy.
Okay.
Therefore, the only way to save the planet Earth would be to eliminate the number one predator on Earth, which are human beings. And it's the exact same thing as, say, Terminator. You have given us a program to do this and that. And so we are going to do exactly what we were programmed to do. It's just not the way that you thought it was going to go down.
What happened to Asimov's laws of robotics here?
It's all, for starters, never let a science fiction writer determine what your machines can and can't do. But yeah,
Okay.
When faced with logic, and that's the thing, Drea, I want to ask you about this. When faced with a higher intelligence that is using strictly logic to determine the outcome of the situation, and that outcome is you are all going to war with one another to the point of extinction, both sides. So we're just going to do this for you. What do you think? What side do you now take of the three? What side do you now take?
Well, you know, I really loved this twist at the end here. This idea that here we are thinking this is a mutant versus non-mutant war.
Yeah.
And there's a bigger, much more, you know, formidable threat happening that we essentially created, or that humans essentially facilitated by this, you know, longstanding interest in power.
Yeah.
So a part of me as an outsider feels like, well, you know, this is what you've created. This AI is a creation of the humans who were driven by power and hierarchy and the need to oppress. And so now the tables are turned and you're the ones being oppressed.
Right. So
you've created a climate, and now you're the victim of that climate. And so part of me is like, yeah, you know, there's a saying in Spanish, bien hecho, like this is what you did. Like kind of like, yeah, you earned this.
Sort of you made your bed, now you have to sleep in it kind of.
I mean, the compassionate side of me, of course, is concerned that this would be global destruction. And this is potentially going to accelerate this dystopian future that everyone was trying to prevent. And this isn't the answer. This is, you know, a horrible solution.
Let me take the devil's advocate approach just for a moment. I'm not trying to get any hate mail. But let's just say for a second I chose the side of the Sentinels.
Okay.
When you're talking about the grand scheme of the Earth, not just of humanity, but of the Earth, is this a bad decision? Is this, if you want to get rid of the one species on Earth that is destroying every other species on Earth, whether it be climate change or too much drilling or war or the wiping out of the rainforest or whatever, if you're talking about an extermination event against the typical traditional exterminators, is that a bad thing? And would the Sentinels then just shut down? If they managed to do it, if they managed to kill everyone off, would the Sentinels then go, mission accomplished, we have nothing to live here for? Like there is no resource on Earth that the Sentinels need. So would they then shut down?
Are the Sentinels, that's a good question. Are the Sentinels able to sustain their own society? Don't they need humans to mechanically support them? And
no, because you would then build machines that could just mechanically support you.
Okay.
The closest thing would be maybe who's running the power plants that's running Master Mold. Yeah. But as we knew from that episode where we got to see the plant, they were literally trying to create a hydroelectric plant that could self-sustain.
You know, at one point, Master Mold says that he wants Dr. Trask to kidnap Gyrick and give him a brain implant, to replace his brain with a robotic brain.
Correct.
What was that about?
So human beings aren't just going to be rounded up. They need the world leaders to say this is what we're doing and to justify it. They need to follow their world leaders. So they are going to kidnap the world leaders, and then they are going to replace their brains with computers so that the rest of the world falls in line. Okay,
so it's sort of a digital brainwashing.
Correct.
Okay. Interesting. They don't get too far on that because in this episode, they do start to round up those international leaders.
Or do they get...
I don't know.
We're not allowed to talk about it. But we know that there is a certain distance with which they did succeed in doing this in some way, shape, or form. We're just not allowed to talk about it.
It's all coming together.
What we're seeing is the seeds being planted for future stories. But in the end, the X-Men come in, they work with Magneto, which, by the way, the Sentinels are really similar to the Borg and similar to Nimrod. We're sort of seeing the evolution of Nimrod because we are seeing the ability to adapt. They know that Magneto is going to be a problem for someone made of metal. So at one point, he begins to try to manipulate them. And they're like, no, all of our pieces are plastic. You can't do anything to us. And then he proceeds in using the ship he's in to the metal ship he's in to destroy.
Look, you're not going to F with Magneto, arguably one of the most powerful mutants.
But they are learning. They do know that there are certain beings out there that have a natural leg up on them, and they are accounting for that. They are making adjustments. That's
intelligence.
Yes.
That literal word, adjustment, accommodation, that is what artificial intelligence, or just plainly that's what intelligence is. You're learning from your environmental experiences and growing and developing to be more successful. So, and survivorship is basically the end goal for any being. So a lot of that really makes sense.
Yeah.
I'd say I didn't quite answer your question. Did you notice I avoided your question?
Yeah, you didn't say what side you're on.
I think, well, first of all, we're experiencing a heat wave in the LA area, and I'm wearing like a winter coat.
Yeah, you're currently wearing a very large winter coat, 3 sizes too big for you.
I am sweating.
Right.
And you're also,
but you still look great.
I feel great. But no, I feel great mentally, but physically I'm really under some duress here. Here's what I'll say though, in answering your question. I don't know if this is going to answer your question thoroughly. We're dealing with very fixed schema. Let's think about what some of these, look, I'll just pick on some people, Senator Kelly, some of these politicians who have agendas, but who also genuinely may hold these beliefs and values and perspectives about mutants being subhuman.
Right.
I truly believe many people in power in the X-Men universe hold those beliefs. And if we are to change people's fundamental beliefs, we can't just talk at them. So the experience that first, and again, Senator Kelly is a really good example here, where not only is Senator Kelly kidnapped and attacked and assaulted and then brought to this center, like a number of things happened to him. They're very unfortunate. And this plan reveals that someone like him can be vulnerable to this element, the standardized government regulated oppression. And when I say government, I mean like the New Order,
right?
The New Order being the Sentinels. And what we know about perspective is that if we have a genuine experience that changes our perspective, we're more likely to be able to dismantle and alter some of our more fixed ideas and beliefs. Does that make sense?
Is that true? Like, I would think it's funny because especially in this day and age where we're so divided, to me, it seems like even the best argument by the other side will force you to double down on your own schema, your own
actually,
beliefs.
You're correct. Most of the time, and as I said, talking to people, talking at people, providing evidence. And look, I'm in the business of research being the foundation for making any kind of argument. You know, I'm very science backed in a lot of the work that I do and the messages that I bring forth. And sometimes simply stating the science or showing the evidence is not enough.
It's not good enough. Not anymore.
And I'm humbled by that. I understand that people need experiential ways in which their perspectives can shift. And notice that I'm not saying it happens all the time,
right?
But I'm saying
when it happens.
I'm saying that if you truly want to change or alter fixed schema, like this, like the ones that these people feel about mutants, you have to give them an experience where they see a different perspective.
Right.
And that could be a personal experience. I mean, people do this with VR. That can be a simulated, imaginal experience. It could be a learned experience with more exposure to different people and community members and parts of the world. We really, we don't give enough credit to the human ability to adjust,
adapt.
Yeah. And so, and I think this is why a lot of people still have hope for, aside from the X-Men universe, like in our own world, we don't simply just give up. We have a sense that that we can change and we can improve and develop and become smarter.
I'm ready, Drea. I'm ready to go. I think let's let the Sentinels have it. We tried. We did it. It was fun.
Are you ready to give it up
now
to the Sentinels?
Now it's over.
Well,
it's better than trying to choose between Xavier and Magneto, in my opinion, because they're both so right on so many levels that the Sentinels just make it an easier, like that. We'll just choose them.
Well, the Sentinels make both Magneto and Professor X's ideology just kind of wash out. Like,
yeah,
it's not, again, it becomes granular, it becomes meaningless. It's sort of,
because the logic dictates that even if Magneto gets his way, let's say that the mutants do manage to conquer the quote unquote humans, which I love the fact that we just heard Master Mold say mutants are humans.
I love that.
And by the way, then Trask gasps like, I hadn't thought about that. I've been wrong all along. The idea that even if Magneto was successful in wiping out or conquering humanity, you would then inevitably have a war amongst mutants. The mutants can't possibly get along any better than humans can anyway. Right.
This is why this message at the very end of this season is so powerful. It's the idea that the differences that you're basing your society on, they're imagined.
Yes.
They're constructs.
Yes.
They're not real.
You did this. You created the differences between these people, and now you're going up against them for those constructs, for those imagined differences between humanity.
I don't know. Now I'm just like siding with the Sentinels.
Now you're see? now you're on my team.
What was I going to say? Well, I was going to say it reminds me a little bit about Dr. Manhattan in Watchmen. Just like a being becoming so intelligent and detached from human society and civilization that our differences and our wars and our discourse, like it just becomes small and minuscule and pointless.
I'm over all of this.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go to Mars for a while.
Yeah, I'm feeling that way.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's just the heat getting to me.
It might just be the heat. So, Drea, were you able to pull anything out of this?
Yeah, I'm joining the Sentinels.
But I mean, like we're talking like AI, and we're talking computers, and logic, and this goes beyond Spock. Spock had that humanity in him, regardless of how much he wanted to ignore it. But you had talked about Vulcans and how that's just going to end the Vulcan.
Well, sure. I mean, the other side of this is true. I said you have this AI. A human created AI being who points out, the flaws in our society and how meaningless they are.
Yeah.
And how we're just destroying each other. And so why not just accelerate what will inevitably happen? And all this sounds super destructive. I think the silver lining here is that what that being is missing, I mean, speaking of Spock, what that being is missing is a sense of compassion. And, and by the way, I mentioned Spock because I believe Spock has compassion.
And to be fair, I mentioned Spock first, so he's in the front of your mind right now.
Yeah, I'm suddenly veering away towards Star Trek. But let me try to say this more succinctly, that it's a reminder that without compassion, you don't have meaningful civilization anyway.
There is no potential for good without compassion toward your fellow humans.
It's almost a hard lesson around why compassion really matters in driving your day-to-day life, your policies, your decisions, your interactions, your social laws. And so what do mutants and non-mutants both have? Mm-hmm. They have compassion. They have human connection. That falsehood around one being human and the other being subhuman, throw that out. This is about the fundamental similarities amongst living beings.
Yeah.
And this is a reminder of that. So there's some good from this. I don't think this is, obviously this is an allegory, right? This is about the need for us to remember to instill compassion and caring. And I know, like, I'm trying not to move so much because this jacket is so loud, and I don't simply mean like, look, I'm not like very touchy-feely, hippy-dippy. That's not the kind of therapist I am.
Yeah.
What I mean by this is simply the dignity and respect and civil coexistence.
Right.
The rights and respect for everybody. That sense of not because you love everyone necessarily, but because it's the right thing to do. It's
the golden rule.
It is. So I don't know. What does that sound like to you? Am I do I have heat stroke? What's
I don't.
Sunstroke?
I do think that you're right. I think that good, no matter how good you think you are, if you only care about yourself or your own family or your own friends, and you're not willing to reach out to your fellow man or woman or child or just person, no matter who they are, if you're not willing to be compassionate and look at the struggles that they are going through and figure out how to help them with their situation, that's what's going to make you a better person. Even if that person is against your traditional way of thinking.
Yeah.
Only understanding where they are in their own lives and helping them is going to make you better. And the more of us that do that, the better the world will be in general. Because otherwise, you've got the extreme other opposite, which is that humanity sucks. We are broken up into too many warring tribes, and we're just going to destroy each other and everything else on this planet in the end. And so I do think that this episode does come with it a pretty great eye-opening realization. The moment that Trask hears that mutants are humans, mm-hmm. and there's no way around that, which, by the way, if you remember, in the beginning, when you would differentiate between mutants and humans, I said, wait, mutants are humans.
I know.
Right?
Yeah,
And so I came to the same conclusion the Sentinels did, even in the beginning.
We've been here.
And so
it's like the end of, you've probably read Lord of the Flies, when the adults show up to the island,
right.
and they're just looking at the wreckage and the destruction and the pettiness of these little boys fighting.
And you're like, this is why we can't have nice things.
Well, it's just like, What are you
Maybe
doing?
we should leave them here. No, totally. So I do think that one little moment that we just played for our audience is the key moment that we are supposed to pull, not only from this episode, but from this entire first season. Because remember, your all-time favorite X-Men, Beast, has been locked away in a prison cell the entire season and has been the epitome of the best one of all of us. Not only is he intelligent, he is willing to fight for the right causes, but also willing to be a pacifist when it comes to the right causes and what that means, even if it means hurting himself in some way, shape, or form. He can't be comfortable there.
His ideology really is about do no harm.
Right.
And a fundamental belief that and this I struggle with. I think he has the fundamental belief that as long as he does the right thing, and truly as long as other people do the right thing, that they'll land in a future that gives equanimity and respect and dignity to everybody.
Right.
And I don't know that I believe that, but I think that's why he sat in prison this entire time, believing that things will turn out for the best. Or believing that due process will happen. And this is such a broken system that what ended up happening with Beast is that at the very end of this episode, we see him being freed. And there's so much, he's reunited with his friends. There's so much joy and a sense of community liberation. But in the back of my mind, I'm realizing all the things that had to happen for this happy ending to occur.
You bring up the happy ending, and I have to admit I'm a little bitter about that happy ending.
Why?
I realize that we're dealing with a 22-minute show, and I realize that it's not wise of Fox Kids at the time to create an animated series about a trial. But I'm a little bitter that the resolution came not from him being in prison and going through the trial that he had been talking about all this time, but instead came from outside factors that the rest of the team was dealing with that then led a person to agree that maybe Beast shouldn't be in a jail cell.
Right. I mean, so we're skipping something. What happened is that Senator Kelly had the ability to reverse the legislation and essentially come out and say that anti-mutant legislation is wrong.
Right.
And his positionality allows for essentially this any anti-mutant policy to be overturned. And I think that's the loophole by which Beast is freed from prison. Mm-hmm. It's as if he was wrongfully incarcerated.
Right.
Am I correct?
Yes. But the problem that I have with that is Beast didn't have to be in prison this whole time. In order for Senator Kelly to have come up with this, no mutant actually needed to be in prison and released. It would have been better had this particular mutant proven that they were right.
Yeah.
And for humanity to have said he is wrongfully imprisoned. But instead, he was just knocked out of the game for the entire season. And the team, while they were bringing him cookies and joining him and bringing him his favorite books, what he did not prove that he didn't belong there.
It's almost like you're saying his civil disobedience and his passive approach to liberation wasn't the key to his release. I agree with you on that.
And instead, we just have to wrap it up real quick. So let's give it a happy ending. And they did, but Beast didn't prove anything. And that I think is what I'm most bitter about, because we both love Beast so much that now I just feel like you just took him out of the season because there was nothing we could do with him. And
I don't disagree with you.
A wasted character, in my opinion. But he's back. And in season 2...
How dare you? Don't say he's a wasted character.
Well, he was a wasted character in this particular season because he's kept reiterating the same point over and over again. But in the end, his point didn't matter. His fasting, if you're talking about like, in a Gandhi-like sense, his unwillingness to fight the system, but instead go with it in order to prove that it works.
I don't know.
Was all for naught.
I mean, let me just say this quickly. I don't know that we have evidence that it didn't have an impact. And let me just say a couple things. When we think about, and I've spoken on this, I think I said this at WonderCon when we had our live panel about X-Men, that for critical social justice work, you have to think about people being active and impactful in different ways and in different positions. So some of us will be empirically motivated, and we do the research and we show what we need to show from a science perspective. Some folks are more maybe able to position themselves in disruptive ways and be more front and center in the message. Some people may be working through the legislation and policy making and advocating at that level. Some people are simply, I shouldn't say the word simply, some people are very effective with taking care of the other folks that I just mentioned. And we think of this as a spoke or a wheel or a pizza pie where there's multiple pieces, and that wouldn't be a whole thing without everyone's input and contribution and taking turns, let's say, in making this movement as big as it can be. And so for his role, I don't know that I have evidence that it didn't matter or that he didn't do anything or that his incarceration didn't have an impact. I would imagine someone on the front lines, someone taking the punches, someone, in the brutal combat is empowered by knowing they've got to get their peer out of jail. Like, there has to be some sense of interconnectedness here.
Sure, but those people on the front lines are the ones who kept saying, why don't you come with us? Let's break out. Let's go.
He ain't the one.
And he kept saying no.
He's not the breakout guy. That's what I'm saying.
No, I understand. But those people on the front lines, they aren't the ones that rescued him. Except they happened to rescue Kelly.
No, but
Kelly
exactly. So they did the exact things that needed to happen.
Sure.
Out in the world.
Yeah.
For
I still think he's
this
given,
guy to be free.
He's given short.
I don't disagree with you on that, but I wouldn't necessarily say he was meaningless or he didn't have a role in this. And I think fundamentally,
but I also don't think that so that would sort of imply that their mission all along was to get him out of prison. This season was not about getting Beast out of prison.
It ain't about just him, but that's the symbology of this.
No, sure, I understand.
It's not really just about this one person.
Right.
But that, even in this one episode, here's what I actually love about X-Men, even though you're not supposed to split the party. Half of them were inside the, Sentinel
base, the
base
factory.
deep down into the earth, and then half were out in on the ground in combat with those who had come out of that Sentinel center. So you had this, I don't know if I said that well, but you have a group of X-Men fighting one battle. You have a group of X-Men fighting another battle based on their abilities and based on their their strategy. And I thought that was cool. And so I don't think anyone sees Beast as a social loafer. You know what that means? Like someone who's just like,
let's make
letting everyone do the work.
I am not saying Beast is a social loafer. I am not saying that anyone on this team thinks Beast is a social loafer. I'm saying...
And he's not a desertist.
I'm saying that he was making a stand to prove a point. And that point was never proven by Beast. It was proven outside with something that was completely disassociated from the reason he was even in prison. And so
I guess I totally disagree because I feel like he doesn't see himself as just one person. He sees
but
himself as a part of this.
Okay, so I think the disconnect here is you are thinking in world, and I'm thinking out of world, which is unfair. I should not be thinking about this because this would be me talking about the logistics of writing an animated series. You gotta wrap it up. As I said before, when you predicted that Beast would not be seen in the next couple of episodes, I said, really? You don't think that they would try to wrap up that storyline in the last episode? And they did. They did it at the very tail end. And at no point in time did we ever see a trial. We don't even know if he had a lawyer. Because whenever they would visit him, he was always by himself in a cell.
You know they didn't give this guy a lawyer.
But I don't know where the process is. What was happening while he was in prison?
I think he was representing himself, right? Because he had one day in court and he was representing himself.
But at no point in time did we see, we just kept hearing from him, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to stay here because doing this will mean more to the world than not doing this.
Yeah.
And he was right, except he was let go because one person changed their mind because of something someone else did somewhere else that didn't even have anything to do with him. He just connected it to him, or the X-Men saved Kelly and said, hey, could you maybe let our friend out of prison? And he was like, oh yeah, sure. No problem. Let me do that for you. Like, so it was either transactional.
Would you have liked to see, like, what would, even if it's just like 30 seconds added to this episode, what do you think would make it better?
In the last 2 episodes, maybe let's have a reference to his trial. Let's have a reference to the due process we have just been hearing about for all of these episodes. And let's see the system work. Let him prove that the system works.
I don't know,
and
Brian.
He didn't prove it. No one proved it. He was pardoned because of people saving the president's life.
Yeah, something pretty big had to happen because I think my perspective on this is that the system didn't work.
No, that means Beast was wrong. Beast was wrong.
Beast was wrong on the fundamental level that he thought he would get due process and be able to receive a fair trial,
right?
And be released that way. I don't know if you remember, but there was basically a mistrial because Sabretooth and the Brotherhood members came in. And there was a riot. So they essentially had a mistrial, and then Beast
there was no mistrial. He was still, I mean, it interrupted whatever the hearing was going on, like the arraignment or whatever. But there was no, he can't be in prison there forever without being able to go through the due process.
Yeah.
He needs his trial with a jury of his peers.
Okay, so you kind of want like a court drama.
So I don't, like I said, it would be foolish for Fox Kids to create a 22-minute animated series that takes place in court. However, if we kept alluding to the trial throughout the season, I would feel better.
I agree.
If at the end, a jury of his peers, and by that, I don't mean 12 mutants. I mean 12 people who may or may not be mutants, all came to the agreement that this guy was right and that the government was wrong. Then I would say, yes, this character was handled well. His story was handled well. Instead, he just sat there for 10 episodes and then only got let go because the president was rescued by a different group of people. And for all I know, it was transactional. It was, well, don't you owe us a favor, President Kelly? And then he's like, oh, you know what? You're right. I totally do. What can I do for you? Pardon our friend who's been sitting there all this time. But at no point in time, with the exception of that arraignment where Sabretooth and Magneto and everybody come in, no one spent any time with news reports or how's the trial going or any of that.
I think that would be cool. I think even him providing strategy from his cell, like you said, getting those updates and then trying to
making him involved. I think you're right. Yeah, if you gave him the opportunity to be involved with the team beyond simply being the recipient of cookies and books, then that would have been helpful. He could have helped them on the outside. And yes, anyone could write in and say, we don't know that didn't happen during their hour-long meetings, but we never saw it. So really all we saw was a pacified mutant who didn't offer up any help except as a symbol. And even then the symbol was tarnished in the end because what he was standing up for didn't even matter. And so I feel like Beast was given short shrift. Which is ironic because now I do realize there were still 3 more seasons of this particular show, but Beast was hands down Eric and Julia's favorite character to write for. They've said it on multiple occasions. In fact, I believe they even said it on our panel that because they got to go to, the book of quotes to constantly give him wise things to say, then he was their favorite character to write for, but he wasn't in the show enough.
I know.
So
there are so many more things that I want to argue with you on this because I feel like we're on different pages here.
Yeah.
I think they did.
Let's hear from the audience.
Yeah, let's hear from folks. I mean, the last thing I'll say is I think they did quite a lot with Beast. Yes, he deserved much more screen time, but when he was on screen, it wasn't just giving him cookies. I felt there was much more symbology to that, and the literature and poetry he was quoting meant something. It was powerful, impactful,
100%.
And it meant to give us some sense of what he was going through, but also it attuned us to the philosophy and values that are important to this end result that they all are celebrating.
Yes.
So I think it's about tone setting. I think it's about the symbolism and centering on what really matters. I don't know that I need to see him in such a significant, doing such critical things in addition to what we saw.
I think my problem with that is let's imagine a universe in which this first season was told where every scene we saw them go to his cell was actually them going to his trial. And everything he said, he was saying to people who weren't the choir. Yeah. So he was preaching to people who already were on his side and also to us, the audience. But if he had been saying this to other people and we had gotten the reactions of those people, that to me would have been far more powerful. And again, look, folks, we're talking about a 22-minute cartoon, right? Like, I get it. I get what you're saying. I hear you. We haven't even published this episode yet, and I already hear what you're saying on the other side. It's just from a storyteller's perspective, I would have thought the trial and him talking and delivering those exact same sentiments to a group of people who were not the X-Men would have been far more powerful. But that's just me.
Yeah.
I like how you immediately follow with, yeah, it is just you. And we'll talk about this once the podcast is over.
Well, Brian, before we wrap up here, you mentioned to me that there's some updates on the original theme song.
I do want to talk about that.
What's going on with that?
So, well, nothing's going on with it currently. I will remind folks that when we started our analysis of X-Men the Animated Series, I brought up the fact that in 2019, a lawsuit was brought up that basically said the famous X-Men theme song was ripped off from another show back in, I believe it was Israel or one of those communities. And when we listened to it, go back and listen to episode 1 of this analysis to hear the comparisons between the two. They were incredibly similar. It would be difficult to say that this was not ripped off from that show in some way, shape, or form. I can say this, that the composer of X-Men the Animated Series theme song, Ron Wasserman, was released from that lawsuit very early on. So no one said this was Ron's fault. And in 2021, the lawsuit was mostly thrown out due to improper various legal legalities. The lawsuit was brought up improperly, whatever. But also it was settled. And Disney settled for some undisclosed. We don't know what the deal was. We simply know that everything's cool. We're allowed to keep hearing this theme song. And as we've heard from the Newton brothers on X-Men 97, they have killed the new incarnation of the theme song. It is so good. And the fact that they've managed to weave that melody into the score throughout this season is so well done. I really think they should have been nominated for an Emmy as well for their work. But yeah, so the courts decided that there's certainly some similarity here and somebody needs to be compensated in some way, shape, or form, but there were a lot of other things that didn't hold up in court, and therefore our dear friends who helped make this show are in no way culpable or under any kind of gun for having ripped off another theme song. But yeah, so I can say it had a happy ending, at least for the X-Men folks.
Nearly 20 years later.
Let's see, there's 92, 02.
Oh, 30 years later.
Yeah, I was like, that math doesn't seem right. I'm younger than I thought. Yeah, so about 30 years,
okay.
A little over 30 years later,
wow.
32 years later. It was I guess 30 years later, because this happened in 2022 or 2021.
Yeah.
It was resolved. So, yay.
Good.
Drea, tell me how excited you are to move on to season 2 or to something else entirely.
I am going to keep my emotions to a minimal. I'm going to keep this response as neutral as possible. I'm excited to cover any and all of the 4 potential shows that we could cover on the next season of the Arkham Sessions. It would be delightful. Any one of those choices would be delightful. Is there one that I think I'd have more fun with? Absolutely. Just by 1 or 2%.
Okay.
But
all right.
They're all great.
So everyone go to patreon.com/Arkham Sessions, sign up for the $3 tier that gives you an opportunity to vote in the poll. And then you will be able to vote for X-Men Season 2, Harley Quinn Season 1, Batman the Caped Crusader, the new series on Max Season 1, and Gargoyles Season 1. Those are your 4 finalists. Go over there right now and vote. Let us know what you think. Within the next week or so, we'll know what we're covering. Then also, again, come see our panel at Comic-Con Saturday night, 7 p.m. in the Grand Marquis Ballrooms, 12 and 13. We're covering, examining the X-Men with 2 members of the cast, 2 members of the writing and directing producing team. It's going to be a blast. Until all of that, Drea, why don't you tell the good folks where they can find you online?
You can find me on social media at Dr. Drea Psychology and my website, drdreapsychology.com.
You can find me. I am at B_Ward028 on Instagram. You can find us both on Instagram at The Arkham Sessions. Email us at arkhamsessions@gmail.com. Find us on Facebook. Join our family over at Fanbase Press to read all of their great comics, to listen to their amazing podcasts, to read their news reports on industry news, and a whole bunch more. Go follow them, Fanbase Press. And until next time, I'm Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Drea Letamendi.
And together we are
The Arkham Sessions.
More beautiful than the beginning of a new day. You never know how it's going to turn out. That's what gives hope to the future.